7 Scariest Recent Archeological Discoveries. 7. The Blue Bottle. Researchers were digging up bodies in the old Trinity Cemetery in Kingston upon Hull when they found one skeleton, unlike others. This skeleton was buried with a blue bottle sitting between her legs. The bottle contained a creepy, sludge-like liquid, puzzling the researchers. There was an inscription on the glass bottle. It said, Hull Infirmary. After investigating, researchers learned that the skeleton is of a woman who passed away because of rickets and osteoporosis. They also discovered the presence of potassium, phosphorus, and sodium in the liquid. The team concluded that it could either be a bottle of urine or a phosphate-based tonic used in the 19th century for curing ailments. It was also exceptionally weird because out of the over 1,500 skeletons, she was the only one with such an artifact. 6. The girl with the finch in her mouth. During the excavation of a mysterious cave in 1967 in southern Poland, researchers found a young girl's burial. She had passed away 300 years ago, which is confusing in itself because people had stopped burying a demised person in caves back in the Middle Ages. But even more unusual and surprising was that the young girl was discovered with the head of a finch in her mouth. Out of every skeleton ever found in Europe, this is the only one with the head of a bird stuffed into her mouth. And to make things even creepier, the girl was only between the ages of 10 and 12 when she passed away. Researchers analyzed her bones, discovering signs of arrested growth. This means she may have suffered from a metabolic disease. However, there is no evidence of trauma, no sign of stab wounds, and no obvious cause of her demise. As for the bird's head in the mouth, that's something nobody can even guess. 5. Mysterious graves. About 1,400 years ago in Europe, people practiced a habit of reopening graves and removing things. Cemeteries throughout all of Europe, from Transylvania in the east to England in the west, have shown evidence of this strange behavior. Graves were opened and manipulated in what archaeologists initially mistook for grave robbing. But after analyzing a series of excavated cemeteries from 5 regions in Europe, they found that the people carefully selected the possessions, leaving behind plenty of valuables. Researchers from Stockholm University say the most popular objects to be removed from graves were women's brooches and men's swords. But they would leave behind all kinds of precious metal objects like gold and silver jewelry. One of the main theories is that people were taking back grave gifts that had been passed on as heirlooms. Perhaps because of the sentimental value of these objects, they were removed and passed on to someone else. 4. The Capuchin Crypt. The Capuchin Crypt in Czech is one of the scariest burial sites in the world. It is a place where monks were mummified and interred for 300 years, up until the 18th century. The crypt is located underneath Brno's Capuchin Church, and the only way into the vault is by navigating a series of winding passageways deep in the underground. The bodies of the monks inside the crypt are not stuffed in tombs or buried in coffins but lined against the walls. They were simply laid out on the floor with their heads resting on bricks and their arms crossed across their chests. Interestingly, the mummification wasn't done on purpose. The monks reused a single coffin for funerary rites. After the public funeral, the bodies would be placed in the crypt where the dry air helped preserve the monks for hundreds of years. There are 24 monks down here in total, still clad in their robes and draped with rosaries. 3. Ancient poisoning. 5,000-year-old bones have revealed the very first case of poisoning. These bones were discovered in Spain with alarmingly high levels of mercury between 2900 and 2600 BC. The higher levels of mercury resulted from contact with cinnabar, which is a mercury sulfide mineral that forms in thermal and volcanic regions. When crushed, cinnabar turns into red powder and was used in painting or during a hallucinogenic substance ritual and accidentally poisoned themselves. Some individuals had 400 parts per million of mercury in their bones. According to the World Health Organization, the normal level of mercury should not exceed 1 or 2 parts per million. Spain may have seen a mass outbreak of mercury poisoning before they finally figured out it was due to the red pigment. 2. Chinese mummies. In the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, researchers discovered hundreds of mummified corpses buried in boats in the middle of the barren desert. Discovered at the beginning of the 20th century, a total of 13 corpses were found, which are now known as the Tarim mummies. Because they were buried in the desert, the bodies became mummified on their own with their hair and clothing intact. The structures that contained their corpses were shaped like boats and covered in cow hides, and oars were used as grave markers. These were ancient North Eurasians, a group that spread into this part of China about 10,000 years ago near the end of the Ice Age. The genetic lineage of these people can be directly connected to the indigenous population of North America and Siberia. What made researchers scratch their heads was the fact that they didn't live near water, they had no use for boats, and yet they used them for their burials. 1. Pickled fetus. Researchers from the University of Warsaw discovered the presence of an unborn child inside the belly of a female mummy. Because of the acidification as this woman decomposed, her baby was pickled and perfectly preserved. This is now the first mummy ever found embalmed with a fetus inside of her. She was removed from Egypt way back in December of 1826, but it wasn't until researchers used CT scans and X-rays and found the fetus. It is suggested that the woman came from a royal tomb in Thebes, probably buried in the 1st century BC. She was between 26 and 30 weeks into her pregnancy at the time of her passing away.